Amour by KittyKqt on Ao3. Summary. Komori Kinoko has never been the social butterfly her friend Setsuna is. She was always just there. But when Setsuna leaves Kinoko alone during a class small trip, someone else finds her. Someone who also happens to have an eye for fashion and a stranger cuisine. It becomes a comfort to have Aoyama beside her, except for the weird moments he disappeared. Finally, she has someone else. Things can change at 4 a.m. randomly. Kinoko sighed, adjusting her mushroom display yet again. The little things just wouldn't grow right, and it was growing increasingly upsetting. This was the 5th kit she was trying out after the last 3 had died randomly, and one had even caught fire. She still didn't know which of her classmates was behind it, or if it was that her green thumb was really that bad. Sure, she could just materialize the mushrooms, make them grow with her quirk, but she really wanted to get them right without assistance from her quirk, even if it took her another 5 kits. She double-checked the lights in her room were ideal, as well as her humidifier set up nicely. Dark and damp. That was what mushrooms were supposed to love. It's what her quirk loved. Someone knocked on her door, and she paused in her fretting, looking over at the oak door. She tiptoed to the peephole, standing on her toes to properly look out. Setsuna waved as if she could see in, her sharp teeth catching the light. Kinoko frowned, looking back at her mushrooms, which could look worse. She opened the door to her lizard friend, who immediately jumped onto her bed and under the covers without a word. "Setsuna," Kinoko called, dragging her name out. "You're gonna make a mush out of my bed." "Mess," Setsuna corrected, sticking her tongue out. "And it's fine." She pulled the covers up over her head, faking snoring. Kinoko grabbed her pillow from under her friend's head, smacking her in the face. "Up, up," she said, even though Setsuna just grinned back. "I won't let you into my shroom if you act like this," she threatened. Setsuna didn't move, grinning up at her wickedly. She almost missed it as something blinked in the corner of her eye right beside her. She shrieked, grabbing her friend's hand before it could succeed in grabbing her jewelry from the stand. "Dang," Setsuna yelled, finally sitting up as Kinoko didn't let go of her hand, glaring at her. She motioned for it back, and it wiggled in Kinoko's hand, making her shiver and let go. "So close," she said, putting her hand back. Kinoko glared at her friend, moving to stand in front of her. "Did you come in here just to try to steal them again?" she accused her friend. Setsuna laughed, shaking her head. "Nah, we're going on a mall trip with 1A. I just wanted to see if I could snag some." She shrugged, flopping back onto the bed. Kinoko frowned, shaking her head. "I've sent you the link to the website hundreds of times," she pointed out. Setsuna said, still lying on her back. "Rather just borrow yours." "But you never give them back." Setsuna's hand floated by her again, and she batted it away, glaring at her friend. "I will eventually." She dragged the word out, sitting up and putting her hand back on. "You ready to go?" she asked. Kinoko glared at her, motioning down to her mushroom print pajamas she had yet to change out of. "No?" Setsuna groaned, flopping back on her bed. "Get ready. I'm bored." "Out," she ordered, pointing to her door. Setsuna shook her head, smiling widely. "Why would I do that?" "Because," she started, "you're a spore loser and are going to steal them if I turn my back." "Sore," Setsuna said, standing up. "And you can totally trust me." She went to the door as she talked, opening it up. Kinoko's brows furrowed as she looked at her friend, who gave up too easily. "Let me see both," she ordered. Setsuna grinned, looking over her shoulder. Kinoko didn't stop glaring, so she shrugged, holding her arms out. She had both hands. And feet. But only 4 fingers on one hand. "Put them down," she said, without even looking at her jewelry. Setsuna frowned, crossing her arms, but she could hear her jewelry clink behind her. "You're not fun," Setsuna complained, her finger floating back. Kinoko laughed, shaking her hand as she prepared to shut the door. "You're not a very fun guy yourself," she said, closing it in her friend's face. "Stop!" Setsuna screamed from outside the door, groaning loudly. Kinoko laughed, glancing over at her mushrooms before turning to her closet. She needed a break from the darkness. thought you said this was a year trip, Kinoko whispered to Setsuna, whose face was set in a scowl. She nodded, huffing and crossing her arms. It was meant to be, but then half of 1A canceled, and I couldn't even drag out most of our class. Kinoko frowned, looking at the odd arrangement of students who had shown up. If she felt like she stood out even among her class, the plain-looking 1A students made it so much more obvious. Does his shirt say shirt? Kinoko pointed out the green-haired boy. Setsuna looked over, a grin splitting her face as she nodded. Yep. She clicked her tongue, giggling. But don't let that fool you. He's meant to be like the strongest dude in his class. And he's not half bad looking. She went to walk away from her, but Kinoko quickly wrapped an arm around hers. You're not leaving me alone, she asked, having to stand on her toes to reach the height of her taller friend. She laughed, grinning down at her. Yep. She shrugged off her arm, still grinning. I ain't letting the chance to make the strongest dude in Class 1A flustered. Kinoko watched her go, suddenly very aware that she didn't know too many others in her class. She could feel Kurio staring at her from where he was with Kamakiri pushing down her skirt. The boy was sweet, but it was obvious he liked her, and she didn't really feel the same. She hadn't told him, though. She didn't know how to. Setsuna was supposed to be her safety to keep him away, but now that she was gone, she suddenly felt very alone, and very in the open. Her large Lolita mushroom dress she had sewn and her headband got looks from most people just walking down the street, but all the others here were in plain clothes, except her eyes pulled to a very loud individual on the sides of the group, speaking adamantly to the redhead, Kirishima or something. Mon ami, you must be telling a joke. To have not tried the brie? Why, that's just despicable. Aoyama, Kirishima said. I don't really want to go to the cheese shop with you. Sorry, man. Kinoko watched as he was dragged away by a blonde with a black streak, leaving Aoyama standing alone. She shifted uncomfortably, watching him cross his arms and look around the group. His eyes locked on hers, and her heart stopped. Setsuna, she called out, trying to find her friend. But as the group was splitting up to different areas, she lost track of her. Mon ami, Aoyama said directly behind her. She jumped, whirling around on the boy, mushrooms popping up on her dress in her shock. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you, she said hurriedly, looking around for somewhere to brush the mushrooms off where they would be out of the way. May I? Aoyama asked, gesturing to her dress. She hesitantly nodded, unsure exactly what he meant as he plucked a mushroom from her dress. Oh, how wonderful! It is a Saint-Chanel, is it not? He asked, inspecting it. It took her a second to realize what he had said, as she nodded slowly. Yes, it is, she said, unsure of herself. How do you know it? Why, it is most common, is it not? He asked, tipping his head as he gently held the mushroom. It is one of the most popular dishes in some of my country's cuisine. She hummed, looking around for her friend, who was still nowhere to be seen. They are easy to make, she agreed. That is quite fascinating, Aoyama said, still holding the mushroom. Come, there's a trash nearby if you would like to remove them. Kinoko hesitated before nodding, tapping her hands together. This boy was strange, but he seemed to be very free-spirited, and she really didn't want to be left alone when Setsuna was terrorizing the 1A boy. She cast a look over to Kurio, who looked away again. Sure, she said hesitantly, nodding. The boy nodded, leading her away from the group. She kept an even pace with him, trying to resist the urge to pull at the hem of her dress. Mon ami, are you all right? He asked kindly, pausing beside the trash. She nodded, pulling off her mushrooms and dropping them into it. Her and her stupid quirk that wouldn't get under control. Sorry for the mess of mushrooms, she mumbled, taking the last few off as quickly as she could. Luckily, they didn't ruin her fabric, which she had specifically chosen due to the distance between fibers. It meant that the roots could grow without worrying about ripping her dress. Still, the last mushroom snagged, and she sighed, dropping it into the trash. It's no worries, my dear, he said, moving his hair from his face with a flourish. Your friend abandoned you, didn't she? He asked, a small smile on his face. Kinoko nodded slowly, staring down at the small rip. She doesn't have much love for not being in the center of conversation. She motioned to Setsuna, who was in two pieces on either side of the green-haired boy. Based on the random movements he was doing, Kinoko guessed she had embarrassed him plenty. Aoyama nodded. The center is a great place to be. I am surprised, however, that you are not joining her. Huh? Kinoko asked, looking back. Why? Look at that beautiful dress you were wearing. I believe that you would like to show it off. He pulled something from his pocket before he gently touched her arm. Let us sit as we talk. She followed him to a bench, taking her headband off. It's just something I do for fun. I like it much more than other accessories, not to be captivating. He chuckled, opening the thing he had taken from his pocket. May I? He asked kindly, holding up a needle. She nodded, adjusting the skirt so it didn't mess with the small hoop she had under it. You sew? I do, he nodded, licking the end of a black thread. I have fiddled with my own designs before. Didn't think you were the only hero fashionista, did you, mon ami? She shook her head quickly, watching him work. Each movement seemed practiced and ready. The stitches were simple, though, ones she had used for patches before. She didn't speak as he worked, careful not to prick his fingers. Does your quirk often flare up when you are surprised? She nodded slightly before she remembered his eyes were down. Yes, it's always happened. She watched as he tied it off, snipping the end with a small pair of scissors. Ever since I was a kid. She stuttered over her words as he put everything back in his kit. Pinhead, correct? The early stage of a mushroom? She smiled, nodding. Yeah, she said, smoothing out the dress. Most people don't understand my mushroom analogies. He smiled, standing up. Come, give me a spin, mon ami. She laughed, taking his hand slowly. Usually she wouldn't, but there was something about him that eased her anxieties. He spun her in a circle, stepping out slightly so her dress spun out. Thank you, she said with a small laugh. Aoyama grinned, holding an arm out for her. Would you like me to accompany me on this trip? I can't promise anything but some company. She hesitated before she gently took his arm. He adjusted her hand, letting it sit comfortably in the crook of his arm. So, what are you getting from here? She asked, suddenly feeling very awkward. He smiled, leading her forward. Let me show you a cafe I enjoy. They have the most fantastic cheeses. She chuckled slightly, nodding as he led her along. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Setsuna, grinning over her shoulder. She shook her head, looking away from her friend. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad out of her room. Kinoko! Setsuna called, knocking on her cracked door. It opened more, the noise making Kinoko jump slightly. Turn on a light in here, she yelled, reaching for the light switch. No, Kinoko yelled, scrambling off her chair. Mushrooms sprouted by the light switch, and Setsuna shrieked, pulling her hand back. Sorry, Kinoko said, sighing. She hurried over to Setsuna, wiping off the switch as she caught the mushrooms. Setsuna sighed, flopping onto Kinoko's bed. Why is it so dreary in here? She asked, turning her head to look at Kinoko. She shrugged, looking over to her plants. I like it this way, she mumbled, sitting on the edge. I get lots of lights from those ones. She pointed at the strip of lights going around her room, casting a faint, dim glow of purple around the area. Uh-huh, Setsuna mumbled. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through it. Kinoko stared at her mushrooms, already stalled in their growth. It was only a matter of time before they died, and she was left with absolutely nothing. Hey, she started to say before Setsuna set her phone down with a loud groan. Kinoko quieted, running her hands over her house dress. So what's going on with you and 1A boy? Setsuna asked, flipping onto her side. What? Kinoko asked quickly, turning to look at her. She huffed, sitting up. Please, we've all been talking about it. Kinoko went to talk, but Setsuna continued. I mean, everyone but Ibara. The girl still wants to pretend like she isn't interested in gossiping. Anyways, she waved her hand. Everyone knows that Kurio has a thing for you. We've all bet on it. Now you have this thing with the Frenchie from 1A, so what's up with him? Kinoko wrapped her arms around herself, shrugging slightly. She had told Setsuna that she didn't have feelings for Kurio, but she guessed that people could still have their own thoughts. I don't know. We've only hung out a few times, and were they dates or not? Setsuna asked, annoyance leaking through her voice. Kinoko shook her head before she paused. Were they actually just dates? Aoyama had taken her to a garden store and bought fertilizer for her mushrooms. He'd bought her a drink from a cafe as well. That was a date, wasn't it? Setsuna sighed, standing up. Listen, I'm not going to tell you who you can and can't date, but really, Kurio is the much better choice. Before Kinoko could talk, Setsuna was already gone, the door slammed behind her. Bye, Kinoko mumbled, staring down at her hands. This is why she liked to stick to her plants. Getting involved with people always led to drama and her overthinking everything. She huffed, standing up. She grabbed the new dress she had been working on from the desk, holding it up. It was a simple white underlayer, but she was trying to get the mushroom patterning just right. Not for anyone else, Setsuna was the only one she would show it to, and she never really cared about Kinoko's work. She sat down, shaking her head again. She pinned her bangs out of the way with her clips before she started the machine up. Her hobbies would keep her mind off of everything. So, mon ami, have you had a chance to listen to that audiobook yet? Aoyama asked, adjusting his sketchbook on his lap. They had been sitting in silence for around an hour when Aoyama had knocked on the door. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. Rather, it was like the silence her mushrooms thrived in, peaceful and inviting. The sound of her machine and his pencils on paper had filled it all. She took her foot off the pedal, tipping her head towards him. I did, she said, laughing slightly. It was captivating. I don't usually like audiobooks. Aoyama shrugged, flicking his hair from his face. You told me you didn't have the patience for reading. However, that book is one of my favorites. I found a good reading for you, just in case so. He smiled slightly, his purple eyes shining in the purple lighting. She frowned before she laughed, doubling over on herself. She saw Aoyama stand up, but paid it no mind as she laughed, clutching her stomach. That was awful. Is that how I sound with my mushroom jokes? She asked, wiping her eyes as she sat up. Her head bumped into Aoyama's hand, resting on the corner of the desk. I thought it was cheesy, he said, chuckling himself. She shook her head, still giggling. Thank you, she managed to get out in shaky breaths as she rubbed the top of her head. He nodded, his hand hesitating near the table. May I? He asked, gesturing to the half-finished dress. She hesitated before she nodded. Give me 1 second. She chuckled under her breath as she finished up the last stitch needed. She pulled it off the machine, clipping the end of the thread. Thank you, he said, taking the dress gently. He barely held it, running his thumb over the stitching. This is beautiful detailing, he admired it. The caps of the mushrooms are extremely well done. Are they different types? She nodded, pointing to the one closest to his thumb. This is a chanterelle. It's the first one that I ever learned to make with my quirk. Despite them looking gold and their spore prints being yellow, when the caps are damaged, they'll actually turn red. He nodded along as she spoke. They're used in dishes, right? She smiled, nodding. Yep, some say they taste similar to apricots, but I found the taste unique to them, and... She paused, looking up at him. Wait, don't you already know all this? Aoyama chuckled, rubbing his neck. Well, yeah, he nodded, sighing. My mom, she used to make a sauce with them back in France. I just like hearing you talk about them. Kinoko froze, staring up at him. He had a soft smile on his face, his bangs blocking one eye. It wasn't the sarcastic look Setsuna usually gave her, and it wasn't the bored one that Ibarra had. It looked more like Kurio's, except this one felt different to her. What? He asked, touching his cheek. Do I have something on my face? She shook her head quickly, looking back at the dress. This one is an enoki mushroom. They're relatively small for a mushroom, so I use them as the hemming, and Am I making you uncomfortable? He asked, sitting down on the edge of her bed. She followed on instinct, shaking her head quickly. He smiled again, chuckling slightly. I appreciate you sharing this with me. She nodded, looking back at the dress. Focus on what she knows. Enoki are quite common here. They're in a lot of soups here, or you can make a crunchy chip-like treats. Aoyama's phone buzzed and he froze, pulling it from his pocket. His face went white, his hand tightening on it. "Who is it?" Kinoko asked. He shook his head, standing up quickly. The dress almost hit the floor in his rush before he caught it and put it back up. I have to take this. I'm sorry." He rushed out of the room before she could say anything, leaving her holding the dress. She sat there for a few minutes before she stood up, leaving the dress behind. She collected Aoyama's sketchbook, resisting the urge to look in it. "Hey," she said, going to the door before she paused. She could hear his worried whispers through the still cracked door, and she paused. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but there was just something about how he spoke. No, I understand," he said, his accent seeming thicker. "Leave her out of this. I will figure it out. Give me the week. You can't be calling me like this out of the blue." He went quiet, and she ducked behind the door when he paced past. "I will get it. I know, he yelled the last part before he sighed, leaning against a wall. "Butendemede," he mumbled, leaning. He went silent again before she heard the phone call end with a click. "Zut Allahs," he sighed before another pause. She scampered back to the bed, grabbing the dress right as the door opened all the way. Aoyama paused, laughing slightly. "Are you all right, mon ami? You look like you've seen a ghost." She nodded, clearing her throat. I think the food I had for lunch might have been bad," she said, coughing into her hand. Aoyama frowned, moving over to her. "Oh no, are you all right? Is there anything I can get for you?" She shook her head, shoving her hands under the dress to hide the way her hands were shaking. "No, I just need some sleep." He paused mid-step towards her before he nodded. "Yes, of course. I'll head out." He paused, looking around. "My sketchbook?" "Oh." She jumped up, grabbing it from where she had set it on the desk. She handed it to him quickly before she looked away. "There you go," she whispered. "Thank you." He bowed slightly before he awkwardly turned towards the door. He stopped by it, looking at her. "You're sure you're all right, mon ami?" She nodded quickly. Yes, I'm fine." He nodded and left, the door shutting all the way behind him. She stumbled forward, reaching for her phone on the edge of the dresser. It clattered out of her grip into the floor, moving underneath it. She watched it go before she collapsed back onto her bed. It was crazy, right? She was just going insane from hearing about all the gossip from Setsuna. Crap about a traitor or spy or something. There was just something about the way Aoyama spoke that wasn't right. It wasn't like any of the times they had hung out in the past, or even like the sports festival. It was just panicked and wrong, and she didn't like the feeling it gave her. She took a deep breath before she grabbed the phone from the floor. It was probably just her imagination, but her mom had taught her to trust in her intuition, and there was only one person she could think of who would know what to do. "I appreciate you coming to me with this, dear, but I'm afraid there's nothing I can do," Principal Nezu said, clapping his paws together. Kinoko shifted uncomfortably in his office, glancing around at whatever she could find. Anything to keep her eyes off the principal. "I'm just going crazy, right?" she asked, wiping her sweaty hands on her dress. Principal Nezu shook his head. "No, dear, no one is going crazy. But I assure you that all students were fully vetted before starting here. All this traitor nonsense is simply that. Gossip to fill the hours." He waved his paw in the air as if dismissing it. Kinoko nodded slowly, standing up as she did so. "Right, of course." She took a step to the door before she paused. "Thank you." She bowed before practically tripping over her feet to escape. "Komori," Principal Nezu said, and she paused. "Don't let other people affect your choices. Sometimes we need to think for ourselves." She turned to him, and he winked slightly. She nodded, rushing out of the room as she shut the door behind him. Aoyama couldn't be the traitor. He was the one who had complimented her outfits and her mushrooms. He had helped her plant more in the past and had made sure the lights stayed dimmed. She shook her head as she turned the corner, running face first into someone. "Ow, ow," she mumbled, holding her nose. "I'm so sorry." She looked up, catching sight of who it was through her hands. Curio smiled slightly, rubbing his neck. Oh, Komori, what a... He stammered slightly, the display cute, but unnecessary. She had too much on her mind. She rocked onto her heels, glancing past him. Sorry, Curio, she said, trying her best to sound cheery. Suppose I should pay more attention. She was already planning her escape route. Actually, he said suddenly, and she planted her heels. I wanted to ask you something. He glanced down at his feet, shuffling slightly before he looked up. Do you like me? Kinoko frowned, her gaze shooting to his. She had expected him to come at it less directly, and this had thrown her off guard. Well, Setsuna said you did, he said quickly, and she quieted. And I wanted you to know that I felt the same. Kinoko frowned, pressing down her dress to wipe off her hands. It wasn't the first time someone had confessed to her, but this was different. She would have to see him every day in class and in training if nothing happened. When did she say this? She asked instead, the words slipping out. He shuffled, pointing behind him. Just right now. She said I could find you here. Kinoko frowned, her eyebrows furrowing. Setsuna knew she didn't feel that way, so why would she... Sorry, she managed to squeak out, turning back to the conversation. You know Setsuna, she's very much. She likes her pranks. Kuryo's face fell, his eyebrows pinching together. So you don't? He asked for clarification. She nodded slightly before waving her hands in the air. It's not you, it's just well, we have a lot on our plates, and I need to focus on my grades, and it's that Frenchie from 1A, isn't it? He asked, a bitter sound to his voice. Kinoko frowned. What? He scuffed his shoe against the floor. It's obvious. You were flirting with him at the mall. Good luck. Before she could say anything else, he was gone, melted into the shadow in front of her. She stood there for a while, staring down at her shoes. Did everyone think she liked Aoyama? Did she have to like anyone? Why was Setsuna trying to force Kuryo on her with lies? She groaned, sitting down on the bench. She tucked her legs up and under her dress, pulling her phone out. She opened her messages on instinct, going to text the person she usually ranted to, Setsuna. She paused, scrolling up through the messages. Most of hers answered with only one-word responses, but she had always responded to Setsuna's. She'd always just brushed it off as Setsuna having loads of friends. It hadn't felt off like this before. She groaned, swiping out of her messages to stare at her wallpaper. A silly little mushroom guy with a spoon. She smiled slightly before it fell, feeling forced. She knew high school would be different from middle school, but she had never been one for drama. And now she seemed to be smack dab in the middle. Before she could close her phone, a message popped up. It was a meme of two mushrooms, a joke scribbled along the top. How much room does a fungus need to grow? As much mushroom as possible. She chuckled, clicking on the full message. Aoyama's name popped up, a small picture of Cheese, his contact photo. She had been ridiculous to think he could be a traitor. All of Setsuna's stupid drama and gossip was getting to her. Feeling any better? The next message read. She frowned, typing out a response before deleting it. It took her 2 minutes to finally send a response. Groaning, she put her phone down. Yeah, I feel a lot better. Thanks for spending time with me. The response came immediately. Anytime. I love seeing your designs come to life. I'll bring some snacks next time. Cheese, of course. She laughed slightly before she stood back up. She was an idiot. There was no way that Aoyama could be anything but sweet. Hey, Aoyama, Kinoko said, stirring her shake around. He hummed, glancing up from his notebook. Why do you hang out with me? He frowned, closing the book gently. Mon ami, why would you need to ask that? He set the pencil down. I hang out with you because you are lovely company. Your puns are hilarious, and your dresses are beautiful. You are a joy to be around. She frowned, setting the glass down. The whipped cream shifted on the top as she tried to turn her mind off. It's just, I know I'm a lot. My outfits make people stare, and my jokes are annoying, and I talk weird, and Aoyama was up in a second, moving over to Kinoko's side of the booth. She moved over on instinct, and he slid in, taking her hand gently. No, he said comfortingly. Who told you that? None of that is true. He paused, tipping his head. Well, I guess the first one is. She nodded, looking down at their hands. Well, Setsuna has been... Aoyama tightened his grip and she stopped talking. Setsuna is wrong. I know she's your friend, but she is wrong. In every way, you aren't annoying at all. You are funny and beautiful and sweet to everyone around you. He kept his grip tight on her hands. She nodded numbly before she paused. It took her a moment to process his words before she looked up. What did you call me? Beautiful, he asked, a hint of confusion in his voice. She nodded, swallowing to avoid speaking. He laughed slightly, letting go of one hand to brush her hair out of her eyes. His fingers gently ran over her cheek, his eyes never leaving hers. My dear, you are beautiful as a sprout poking through the dirt or the comets that streak through the night sky. That is why people stare when you walk into a room, because you brighten it up for everyone. Tu es mon rayon de soleil. He switched to French easily, the words seeming as natural to him as breathing. She wanted to ask him to translate, but her throat closed up. She couldn't think of anything as she looked into his bright purple eyes, etched with an emotion she couldn't describe. He didn't say anything, either, slowly bringing her hands up. She let him, watching him with a practiced gaze as he lowered his lips to her hand. It's warm where they brushed against her skin, sending a jolt of electricity through her. It's enough to break her out of her trance. What? She asks again, before she feels dumb for it. He simply smiles, searching her face for something. She doesn't know what to give him. What does she have that he can have? It's easy with everyone else. Everyone wants something. But he hasn't ever asked for anything, hasn't shown he only needs someone to listen like Setsuna, hasn't shown he only needs someone to reassure him like Kurio. He's just been there. She stares at their hands before she looks up at him, fully looks at him, the sincerity in his eyes masking what she fully sees now as deep eye bags, the small mole under his eye, and the subtle turn of his features that others didn't have. Then his lips, which he had used to praise her time and time again. Not just today, every day. Every time they had met and every time they had texted, she had always brushed it off as him being nice. What if it was something more? He spoke again, his lips moving slowly. May I kiss you, mon amour? He asked, the new nickname sending chills down her spine. She wasn't even sure of the meaning. She nodded slowly, not trusting herself to speak. One hand stayed gripping hers while the other moved up, cupping her jaw gently. He moved slowly, giving her time to push away, but she didn't. It was fast, his warm lips against hers for only a half second. But when they were gone, she found herself wishing they were back. Are you okay? He asked, his accent seeming thicker. She nodded, letting go of his hand to touch her lips gently. They didn't feel any different to her fingers, but to her, they felt so much different. What does mon amour mean? She asked finally, the unfamiliar words stumbling over her tongue. He laughed, his shoulders relaxing slightly. It means my love. He paused, letting her process them. Is that all right? Mon amour, she said, trying to make them sound like when he said it. Mon amour, she repeated before she laughed slightly. Yeah, that's fine. He grinned, his cheeks getting small dimples as he brushed his hair from his face. Mon amour it is, then, he said, before he leaned back in. She closed the rest of the distance this time, her kiss quick and unfamiliar. For once, she didn't worry about it being right. Aoyama, Kinoko whispered, tapping on the door. Truthfully, she had never been over to his dorm yet, even in the month they had been dating. Well, secretly dating. She wasn't ready to deal with Setsuna yet. It took a second, and she could hear things clattering before he opened the door. His hair was a mess, hanging all over the place instead of neat how it usually was. The bags under his eyes seemed bigger as well. Instead of commenting on any of those, she leaned forward and planted a kiss on his cheek. It made her giddy, bouncing on her toes as she walked in. He smiled sweetly, but it only heightened how exhausted he looked. "What are you doing here, mon amour?" he asked, his accent extremely thick tonight. She handed him the mushroom decaled basket she had brought, rocking on her heels. "When I didn't see you at lunch, I asked one of your classmates. They said you weren't feeling well." He stared at her for a moment before his gaze went to the basket in his hands. "It's a quirk issue," he mumbled before he hissed slightly. The basket fell from his hands, the contents scattering across the floor. He clutched his stomach, stumbling back onto the bed. Kinoko was by his side in an instant, kicking the stuff away. She wrapped an arm around him, acting before she could second-guess herself. "Take a deep breath in," she said, rubbing his back. "Where does it hurt?" He didn't say anything, and she could hear his teeth grating in pain. "Lay down," she ordered him, using her other hand to hold the front of Aoyama's chest. She forced him back, watching as he gripped at his stomach, his shirt balled up in his hands. She held his shoulders in her hands, taking a deep breath in. She blew out gently on his face, and he froze, holding his breath. She saw him release it a second later, though his face was still wretched in pain. It took another minute before he sighed, opening his eyes. Tears were at the edges of them, but he wiped them away quickly, coughing as he turned away from her. "Breathe, okay? I'm right here in your shroom." He didn't chuckle at her pun this time, curling his legs up. "You should go," he mumbled, his words muffled into his hands. She shook her head, hurrying off the bed to grab some of the scattered stuff. She brought it back to the bed, laying it out. "I know you don't like to talk about your quirk, but I looked into it." She opened one of the boxes. "I know it's not the same, but it affects your stomach, right?" He didn't say anything, so she sat, waiting for him. He eventually moved, sitting back up. He turned to her, his face laced with sweat and tears. "It'll go away in a day. Just go." She shook her head, holding up the box. "It's not the same, but this is a heating pad for menstrual cramps. It should slightly help." "It's a lobster," he said, looking at the stuffed animal she had taken from the bag. She looked down at it, the little creature bright red with white spots. "Well, it's actually a menstruation crustacean. I added the spots," she explained. "It's already warmed up." He frowned, touching it softly before he pulled his hand back. She sighed, handing it over. "Put it on your stomach. It'll help ease the muscles that are causing pain. Well, I don't honestly know, because I doubt it's the same as a period since you don't have a uterus, but we can try." He didn't move, staring up at her with wide eyes. The purple seemed to almost sparkle despite how sick he looked. "What else do you have?" he asked softly, looking away. She smiled, holding up other stuff. "I brought some teas that have helped me, as well as dark chocolate. I wasn't sure if you liked dark, but I do, so..." She shrugged, showing off more. "This is a heating pad blanket thing. It needs to be plugged in, but it doesn't have any weight, so I find the crustacean more helpful for that. I also have pills, but I'm sure you've tried those." He nodded, and she sighed. "Have you tried anything else?" "Usually I can push through my bad days, but I feel like I'll puke," he explained softly. She shrugged. "I mean, it's messing with your stomach, right? That's not surprising, and it won't go away. Quirk issues suck. I can only try to help." He didn't say anything else, gently touching the candy she had brought. She glanced away, her eyes falling on the belt at his side table. He had always had it on around her, so seeing him without it was strange. Before she could ask about it, though, he hissed in pain again, clenching up. "Lean back," she said, pushing the stuff out of the way to help him get to the head of the bed. She grabbed the crustacean and went to put it under his shirt. His hands grabbed hers as she touched the hem of the shirt. "Don't," he mumbled, the word sounding wrong through his clenched teeth. She nodded, setting the lobster on top instead. She pushed down onto it, her hands warming up. "Take a deep breath and focus on me," she said, trying to hold his gaze. He turned away, his face twisted up in pain. She tapped his cheek and he looked back, tears coating them. "Breathe out as slowly as you can. Try to relax your jaw with it." It took 2 more breaths before he did so, and she cringed slightly as she could hear his jaw loosen. "Good. Now your shoulders," she said, keeping her weight on the lobster. She had seen bad pains before, but nothing like this. His face was twisted up in pain, sweat sticking his blonde hair to his face. Even when she managed to get him to take a full breath, it didn't last long before another wave made him clench back up. It took 5 minutes till he fully relaxed as she guided him through breathing exercises. She glanced at the clock on the nightstand, frowning. He had been in pain all day, and she hadn't known. "Don't say anything," she said when he opened his mouth. She took the small pack of napkins she had brought and used one to dab at his face. He kept the lobster clutched to his lower stomach, his gaze flickering away from hers. "You should have texted me earlier," she mumbled, brushing hair from his face. She unclipped one of the mushroom clips from her hair, using it in his. "It's fine. I can handle this on my own," he mumbled, tucking his legs up. "You should have just gone, mon amour." She felt goosebumps move up her arms at the name, a smile spreading on her face. "Shh," she said quickly, shaking her head. She still hadn't gotten used to the nickname. "I'm here for you. That's what girlfriends do." "Girlfriend," he whispered, and she froze. "You've never said that before." She stared at him before she chuckled slightly and leaned forward, kissing him on the cheek. "Is mon amour not a nickname for a girlfriend?" she asked, opening up the chocolate. She handed a piece to him, and he bit into it, a smile spreading across his tired face. "It is," he nodded, taking another bite. "Thank you for this." He held up his last small bite and gestured to the other stuff. She shrugged, leaning up next to him. "It's what you do when you care. Isn't that what you said when I got hurt in training?" He nodded, messing with the lobster's claws. Again, silence fell in the room as they shared the chocolate. His next attack came 10 minutes later, worse than the first. It lasted 8 minutes, and there was one point she swore she could feel the muscles tense and move even through the crustacean. His breathing was shallow as the attack ended, his sweat covering him. She ran out and returned with a small bucket of water and a rag quickly, using it to dab at the sweat on his forehead. He let her, his eyes glazed over and unfocused. It was scary. It wasn't how he had ever acted before, even when she had seen him get hurt in joint training. This was unnatural. Part of her wanted to ask what quirk would do this to its user, but she didn't. Her curiosity didn't matter right now. "It helps more if it goes against your skin and not through your shirt," she said, coming back with the crustacean after microwaving it again. He had had 3 more attacks in the last hour, all spanning 8 to 13 minutes. He took it from her, setting it back down on his stomach. It's fine," he whispered, looking away. She sighed, taking a pillow from his bed to hold in her lap. It took a moment to find the words, deciding to turn the conversation away. "Did a student make your belt?" she asked, nodding towards it. He stared at it before he looked away, his gaze falling back to the crustacean. "No, I've always had it, since I got my quirk. It's the only thing that helps most days." "Not today." He shook his head. "Some days it makes it worse. I wouldn't even be able to stand or keep any food down if I went to class today." She nodded, her heart hurting as his voice cracked. Aoyama was always the calm and collected one whenever she was around. This felt vulnerable and raw, and she wasn't sure she could say anything to make it better, not if he had been living with this for so long. Instead, she leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. He set his head on top of hers, and she relaxed more. She kept her breathing even, focusing on each breath as she felt his breathing match hers, until another attack made him cry out in pain and leave her stumbling forward to help. "Kinoko!" Setsuna yelled, not even bothering to knock as she barged in. She flicked on the big light, hopping into bed beside Kinoko. Kinoko groaned, pulling the bast blanket over her head to block out the light. She'd been up all night with Aoyama, only managing to sneak out an hour after he had fallen into a fitful sleep, 10 minutes before Ibara had done her morning passes at 6 a.m. Setsuna didn't get the message, though, dragging the blankets off of Kinoko. "Wake up!" she yelled, jumping back beside Kinoko. "It's already 8 a.m. and you promised me that you'd go shopping with me today." Kinoko resisted the urge to jab her foot into Setsuna's stomach as she shook her head. "At noon, please. I want at least 1 more hour of sleep." Setsuna didn't say anything else for a while, but Kinoko wouldn't have cared if she did. She was already falling back asleep. She forced her eyes open, staring at a stain on the wall. Setsuna being quiet meant something was wrong. She sat up, the motion making her head spin. "Setsuna?" Kinoko asked, blinking slowly in the bright light. She was standing across the room, holding a small mushroom figurine. "This is new," she whispered, her brows furrowed. Kinoko swallowed, nodding slowly. Aoyama had gotten it for her a week ago when he had seen it shopping. She hadn't thought Setsuna would even notice it. "Yeah," she managed to whisper, but even that sounded like a betrayal to her. She should have told Setsuna about Aoyama already. She just hadn't wanted to. She had had one thing to herself without Setsuna, and she didn't want to give it up. "You haven't been hanging out with us as much," Setsuna said, sitting on the foot of Kinoko's bed. The figure was still cradled in her hands, her thumb tracing the carvings. "I've been busy with Aoyama," Setsuna said, looking over her shoulder at Kinoko. She didn't respond, and Setsuna sighed. "Kinoko, I thought I already told you not to go for him. It's not going to work out. You and Kurio right there. You had Kurio right there, and you just ignored him. Everyone knows that Aoyama is weird. Even his own class finds him annoying." "Stop," Kinoko said, the word coming out before she could stop it. Setsuna paused, looking surprised as she watched Kinoko. "Don't be saying stuff like that. Not about my boyfriend." Setsuna's eyes went wide, her fist tightening on the figure. Kinoko resisted the urge to crawl over to her and rip it out of her hands. "Boyfriend?" she asked, her voice laced with something Kinoko couldn't place. "You've got to be kidding me." Kinoko shook her head, tucking her legs up. "We've been dating for a month. He's really sweet and—" "Kinoko, please," Setsuna said, cutting her off. "That boy is way too much for you. You're too much for him. Everyone knows you're a lot anyways. He's just going to end up breaking your heart, and I'm going to have to pick up the pieces. Just like Kai." "He's not Kai," Kinoko snapped, the name bringing back old wounds from middle school. "Just because you didn't pick him out doesn't mean I can't love him." "Love?" Setsuna asked, scoffing. She tossed the figure back on the desk, and Kinoko winced, watching it clatter off and onto the floor. Luckily, it didn't shatter. "You don't know the first thing about that. You think if someone gives you a fraction of attention, it's love? God, grow up." Kinoko shoved her hands into her blanket, her mind racing. She was too tired for this today, too tired to try to read Setsuna and placate her, too tired to figure out what she wanted to hear. Despite Kinoko's flair, Setsuna kept talking. "Just like Kai, you're going to end up alone, crying on some bathroom floor because you're too pathetic to see that someone is just using you. That's why I picked Kurio," she said. "Why I told him you liked him and kept talking to him about you. Because that boy is just like you. Too pathetic to dump someone because they're so desperate for love." "God, Kinoko, I thought you had learned to listen to me." "Out," Kinoko said, releasing her grip on the blanket. "Get out." Setsuna huffed, raising an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "I said out," Kinoko yelled, throwing the blanket off of her. She could feel the tears pricking the corner of her eyes, but she was in too deep now. Setsuna wouldn't forgive her for yelling. For once, though, Kinoko didn't care. "Who I date is none of your concern. Stop sticking your nose where it doesn't belong and go get your own damn life." She pointed at the door as she yelled, her voice cracking. Setsuna scoffed at that, shaking her head. "You know you'd be miserable without me here. No one else would laugh at your dumb jokes or humor your fashion taste." Her lip curled up at that, and Kinoko's anger boiled. "I said get out!" Kinoko screamed, tears pouring down her face as she stomped her foot. Setsuna didn't move, crossing her arms over her chest defiantly. "Not until you apologize to me." "Apologize? To you?" Kinoko whispered, her tired brain tripping over itself to keep up. Setsuna grinned, tipping her head how she always did when she thought she had her way. "Apologize for yelling at me," she said simply, as if Kinoko didn't have tears pouring down her face. She glared at her friend through those tears, her blurry, cocky grin making Kinoko's blood boil. She stared as Setsuna's eyes went wide, her calm expression disappearing as she gripped her throat. The cough she made sounded distant as Kinoko glared at her, her fists balled. Setsuna fell to her knees, and Kinoko smiled, her stupid calls for an apology silenced. Finally, she had some quiet so she could think, even over the violent coughing. Then someone grabbed her, their warm body crushing through her muddled mind. "Breathe," they said, blowing the hair from her face. She did so, sucking in a breath with them. Slowly, Aoyama's face came into view, his tired eyes panicked and filled with worry. Then she heard them. The sickening coughs coming from below her, broken by gasping breaths. She gasped, feeling the bond break as she deactivated her quirk. She wasn't even sure when she had activated it. "Setsuna," she whispered, dropping from Aoyama's steady grip to grab her friend's hands. They were cold and clammy, like Setsuna's face, her hair sticking to it. She coughed and coughed, gagging on nothing as Kinoko tried to do anything. She brushed her hair back out of her face and patted her back, every second hurting her more. "Drink," Aoyama's calm voice came, his accent instantly soothing a small part of Kinoko. "Lettement." Kinoko's eyes shot to him with the French, the translation happening quickly in her mind. "Slowly," Kinoko said, looking back to her friend. Setsuna did so, sipping on the glass through bouts of ragged breathing. She finished it, her hand shaking as she slammed it on the floor, Aoyama sliding his hand under it to stop it from shattering. "You tried to kill me," Setsuna whispered, and Kinoko froze. "No, I didn't. It was an accident and—" "Get off of me," Setsuna said, ripping her hand away as she stumbled to her feet. Aoyama went to help her, but she shoved him back. "You too, freak." Kinoko went to scream at her again, but Aoyama held a hand up, shaking his head. Setsuna stormed out of Kinoko's room, not bothering to look back. "She tried to kill me," Kinoko heard her say. She watched almost all her class glance in before disappearing, each running their separate ways. They had all seen it. I almost killed her," Kinoko mumbled, the weight of the words and her actions coming crashing down on her. Aoyama caught her as she stumbled over her feet, setting her down on the floor instead of the bed. He didn't say anything as he wrapped his arms around her, his grip steady and tight. She sobbed into his shoulder, her fists curling up into his pajamas as he rocked slowly. He brushed her hair back, his quiet voice distant. "Tout va bien, mon amour. Respire avec moi. Setsuna va bien. Elle respire." His voice sounded perfect in French, his accent invisible among the words she was too tired to process. It took longer for her to convince. It took a while to get her mind under control, and when she did, she didn't move. Aoyama had tucked his legs up to keep them secure on the floor, his hand running through her hair, the other on her back. It took longer for her to convince herself to speak, the words sounding loud in the quiet room. "Why are you here? Your dorm isn't in this building." He shook his head, his hand leaving her hair. "One of your classmates texted me that they heard yelling. I came as fast as I could." He held his hand out and she took it, watching his thumb trace circles. "Who?" He shrugged. "Sunatori, I think. It was in English," he explained. She nodded before she paused, sitting up. "You know English too?" she asked, her brows furrowing in confusion. He shook his head back and forth. "Very little. I spoke it a bit growing up." She nodded, leaning back against him. Setsuna's face was still plastered in her mind, her terrified gaze as she choked on mushrooms. "Hey, she's okay. You stopped it," Aoyama said, tightening his grip on her hand. She nodded, tucking her legs up beside his. "You never talk about your childhood," she whispered, trying to change the subject. He nodded, though the movement seemed stiff. "We've only been dating for a month. Plus, it wasn't anything special." He paused, tracing his thumb over her hand, and she looked up at him. His gaze was distant, and she could see the exhaustion etched on his face. Rather than force him to talk, she stood up on shaky feet, him following close behind to keep her up. Can we take a nap?" she asked, stumbling over the words and suggestion. He chuckled, nodding. "Sorry, you were up all night with me." She shook her head, rubbing at her eyes. I'm fine. I'm fine. Glad you're feeling better. He smiled, lifting the corner of his shirt to show the leather band across his waist. She could see where his skin was stretched against it, clearly tight under it. It made her flinch slightly, but she tried not to show it as she clambered back into her bed. Aoyama turned off the light, leaving the door open a crack. Thank you, mon amour, he whispered, climbing in next to her. Thank you, she told him in return, kissing him gently as he lay next to her. She fit into him perfectly, and for one moment everything else faded away. It was only his gentle touch and loving whispers and nothing else, not the fear of hurting her friend or the worries of anything outside the door. It lasted until his phone rang the next second, and he froze, scrambling off the bed quicker than she could process. He stared down at his phone, biting his lip. Yuga? She asked before she paused. His gaze shot to hers, his mouth hanging open slightly. His first name had just slipped out, not on purpose. He smiled softly, but through the exhaustion, it wasn't convincing. I'm sorry, mon amour. I have to go. I'll see you tonight. She went to respond, but he was already gone, leaving her without even a kiss. She grabbed the pillow he had used, curling it into her chest as she tucked her legs up. She didn't care that the door was still slightly open as she cried, the tears making her body shake. Setsuna was wrong. Aoyama wouldn't leave her like Kai had. That was different. It had to be different, because if it wasn't, she didn't know if she could pick herself up again. Not without Setsuna there. Kinoko yawned, rubbing her eyes slowly. Her room was still dark, the clock in the corner reading 4 a.m. Yuka? She whispered, blinking slowly. He was standing in the light of the doorway, his blonde hair catching the golden rays from the light behind him. I didn't mean to wake you, he said, his voice laced with the telltale accent of him being tired or upset. I just wanted to stop by. She nodded, her brain not processing anything. Come here. It's too dark to see you. She tapped the bed for him to sit down. He shuffled over but didn't fully sit down, leaning over the bed instead. She kissed him back, gasping slightly as he held it longer than before. When he pulled back, she reached out, touching his face. Yuka, why are you crying? She whispered, her heart beating both from the kiss and her worry. He chuckled, shaking his head as he desperately tried to wipe his eyes. I'm okay, but I need to talk to you. He glanced over at the door before he looked back at her. The second he looked back, she could see the way the light caught on his teary eyes and the terrified look on his face. Is someone out there? She asked, kicking off the blanket. He grabbed her hands before she could stand up, holding them tightly. I can't explain it all. It's so much, and you're going to hear so much more. Whatever they say, I promise that this wasn't a lie. I love you, okay? I love you. He repeated the last part, frantic to do so. Yuga, you're scaring me. What's happening? She asked, pulling her hands from his. He shook his head, standing up quickly to block the door. His hands were shaking as he touched her face, cold and clammy on her skin. Mon amour. Mon chéri, I love you. I love you so much. This was the only real thing. The only thing. His words were broken with sobs, and the tears kept flowing down his face. Yuga. There was a small knock on the wall, and she sidestepped Yuga, her hands falling off his hands falling off her face. She opened it all the way, staring at Mr. Eraserhead and a detective she had seen around. Behind them were 2 police officers, their gazes on the floor. Yuga, what's happening? She asked, spinning around to look at him. In the clear light, he looked awful. His hair was a mess, and his face was clenched in pain and tears. She paused when she saw the metal handcuffs on his wrists. I'm sorry, he mumbled, stepping towards her. She wasn't sure what made her do it, but she stepped back on instinct, her eyes on his wrists. Mr. Eraserhead, what's happening? She asked, turning to him. She could feel the panic rising in her voice, the tears already stinging her eyes. I'm sorry, Komori. I can't say anything just yet, Mr. Eraserhead said, his gaze steady on hers. She shook her head, glancing between them all. This isn't right. There's been a mix-up. Yuga wouldn't... What do you think he did? Just tell me what's going on. I can help. That's my job. Please just... Mon amour, Aoyama said, and her shoulders relaxed on instinct with his voice. Her stress was back the next second as he took her face in his hands, the metal clinking. Breathe. I left a notebook for you in my room. It's on my desk. They didn't make a mistake. He ran his thumb over her cheek, and she leaned into the touch. I love you. None of this is on you. He kissed her gently, and she pulled back just to rest her head in the crook of his shoulder, just to be next to him. This wasn't right. It was only a week ago that he had held her when she had cried about Setsuna, only a week of him being the only one there for him, at lunch and after school, late into the night, except for when he had to rush off. It's time, the detective said, stepping forward. Kinoko didn't move, wrapping her arms around him tightly. She felt the detective's hand brush against hers as he took Yuga's arm. She shook her head, her hands tightening in his shirt. No, I'm not ready, she mumbled, her words muffled in Yuga's shirt. Mon amour, he said gently, kissing her head. He held her face up with one hand, brushing her hair out of her face with the other. The metal brushed up against her, and she winced slightly. He pulled his hands back quickly. You're going to be okay. Go to Setsuna. She'll forgive you when you explain. The detective's hand tightened on Yuga, pulling him out of her grip. His shirt pulled up slightly, and she gasped, shoving the detective's shoulder. Where's his band? He needs it. Yuga, are you in pain? She asked, turning back to him. I'm fine, he said, but she knew he wasn't telling the truth. He couldn't be with how much pain he was in usually. Just go. She went to argue, but it was too late. The detective led him away, leaving her standing in the middle of the hallway. I'm sorry, Mr. Racer had said, nodding at her before he followed them. She watched them until they were at the end of the hall, turning to go down the elevator. Mon amour, Yuga mouthed, nodding at her. The doors to the elevator shut, leaving her utterly alone in the hall. Her breaths came in short, her hands shaking as she grabbed at her face, everywhere he had touched, everywhere he had kissed. It was a lie. It was just a bad dream. It had to be. He would come back in the hallway and hold her and tell her it would be okay. He would kiss her and make her stupid joke about cheese, laughing at her as she cringed. He'd help her drape her clothes and bandage her up when she accidentally nicked herself sewing. She wasn't sure when she started moving, her feet stumbling and tripping. She didn't make it more than a few steps before she collapsed to the floor, her knees smacking hard into the floor. She collapsed, grabbing her stomach as she sobbed, her tears making her throat raw. Something touched her shoulder, but she didn't care, her eyes too filled with stinging tears to see anything. He had left her. He had left her crying in the hallway after lying to her. She knew he was keeping a secret. She knew that. She should have listened. She should have never gotten close. She wasn't sure when she refocused on anything, the soft touch of hands combing through her hair. They moved in a familiar rhythm, alternating between rubbing her scalp and smoothing down her strands. She forced her brain to focus on them before she heard something. It was a quiet voice, covered by static that made her stomach churn. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise, it said, the familiar words making her cry more. Up from a past that's rooted in shame, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide. Welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Setsuna spoke each word clearly, her speed matching her soothing movements. Kinoko hadn't heard the old poem in years, yet she followed each line. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. A poem Kinoko's mother had taught them both in elementary school. Snuggled up on their couch, a small bowl of popcorn between them. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors give, I am the dream and the hope of the slave, Setsuna continued, kissing the top of Kinoko's head. I rise. I rise. Kinoko mumbled along with her, the words familiar and safe. She needed something safe. I rise, they finished together, before it grew silent again. Setsuna didn't stop running her hands through Kinoko's hair until she forced herself to sit up off the floor. She froze, glancing around. How? She mumbled, looking at Setsuna's room. She shrugged, tucking a strand of hair behind Kinoko's ear. You were out of it. That was the third time through, she mumbled, dropping her hand. Kinoko glanced up at the clock above the door, the clock ticking past 6. Over 2 hours since Yuga had woken her up. He's gone, she choked out, swallowing the tears. She was so tired of everything. Setsuna's face crumbled as she grabbed Kinoko and pulled her into a tight hug. It was crushing, but Kinoko didn't move, letting her friend hold her. I'm so sorry, Kinoko. I'm so sorry. She rubbed at her back, and Kinoko didn't trust herself to respond. When she eventually forced Setsuna away from her, she froze, her friend quickly wiping her eyes. You're crying, she asked, the shock stopping her own tears. Setsuna laughed, the sound broken. Fuck off, she mumbled, groaning as she threw her head back. I've been such a shitty friend to you recently, and I'm sorry. I don't like seeing you cry like this, and she shook her head. How are you doing? Kinoko stared at her in shock before she laughed as well. The situation was awkward and strange, everything piling into one. She wanted to run after Yuga. She wanted to beat that detective who had taken him. She wanted to ask Setsuna why she was apologizing. She wanted to figure out why her friend was being weird. I want to sleep, she blurted out before she winced. That wasn't the thing to do right now. Setsuna paid it no mind, though. Yes, scooch. She shooed her backwards, and Kinoko complied on instinct. It wasn't until she was tucked in, the blankets up to her chin, that she paused. What? Setsuna asked, tipping her head. There's a notebook. In his room. She kicked the blankets off. I have to get it. I have to. Setsuna's hand grabbed hers, holding her in the bed. The rest of Setsuna was already at the door. I'll be back. Stay here. Rest, she said, holding her missing limb out. Her hand flew back to her, and she shut the door, leaving Kinoko alone in the dark. The tears started back up, filling the room with sound as she drifted back to a fitful sleep. She wasn't allowed to see him for another week. Every second she was alone, she found tears on her cheeks that she didn't remember crying. Setsuna was by her side as often as she could be. She was there when Kinoko forced herself to read the notebook explaining everything. She was there when the whole class was given the news that the traitor had been caught. She couldn't celebrate with them. She could feel them tiptoeing around her. Even the word made her want to vomit, which she had on a few occasions. Traitor, liar, spy. She heard them all. Sitting alone in the police precinct made her stomach churn more, the words coming crashing back. She could feel the officers staring at her, could hear the whispers guessing at her. She was too tired to pretend to be fine anymore, too tired to even try. Komori, a voice asked, and she looked up. It was Midoriya from Class 1A, the Wonder Boy. He had a small smile on his face, one of the only parts of him not covered by bandages. I thought that was you, he said with a cheery voice. She didn't return it, looking away. How could he smile like that? Yuga was in his class. Yuga had talked about him before, about how he was his only close friend. Now he was smiling like nothing happened. Midoriya sat beside her, and she flinched, moving away. I'm not smiling because I'm happy, he whispered, rubbing his hands together in an awkward gesture. It's hard to smile. It was hard to see him. How is he? Kinoko asked quickly, turning to face him fully. Is he okay? His band, do they have it? He didn't when they took him, and it hurts him to be without it. Midoriya didn't say anything, and she quieted, tucking back at the silence. He chuckled, the sound sounding wrong. He's as good as can be. He asked me the same thing about you, actually. He tipped his head, his curls falling in front of it. I'm glad he managed something true in between it all. There was something more to the way he said it, but she brushed it off. None of that mattered anymore. It was done. You can't, he sighed, the smile dropping. She could see the exhaustion in his face through the scars and freckles dotting it. You can't leave him. It would ruin him. I'm not trying to guilt you or anything, but I won't, she whispered, and he paused. Not over this. He made a mistake. I know it all. He didn't mean for any of this. He just wanted a normal life, wanted a quirk like everyone else. Midoriya nodded numbly, continuing to rub at his bandaged hands. He made a sound like he was about to speak before the detective walked up. Komori, he asked, looking down at her. She stood up quickly, grabbing her bag she had brought. He raised an eyebrow, and she looked down at it. Your officers went through it already. I can see him? She asked, hating how hopeful she sounded. The detective sighed, nodding. For an hour. Then he's being moved to a facility. He sounded sorry, but she couldn't bring herself to look at him anymore. Every time she tried, she just thought back to how tight his hands had been on Yuka. Komori, Midoriya said, quickly, and she paused. Thank you for coming. Kinoko nodded numbly before turning back to follow the detective. The walk couldn't have been that long. Still, it felt like an eternity, watching him unlock the door and wait for her to enter. He's through here, he said, going to open a second door. She stopped him, her hand resting on the doorknob. Can I go in alone? Of course, the detective said, stepping back. She pushed open the door slowly, shutting it behind her gently. She didn't turn around, the gentle rustling of metal clinging through her ears. Mon amour, he said, his voice quiet and small. Her hands fell from the doorknob, the bag clattering to the floor. She turned and ran at him, grabbing him before he could react. Yuka, she mumbled into him, his strong hands keeping them up. Still, she could feel them shaking, so she stepped back, staring at him. His wrists were attached to the table as well as his ankles. She could see the small red marks on his wrists from where he had strained to catch her. Oh, she mumbled, forcing herself to move closer to the table so they wouldn't pull at his skin. He shook his head, grabbing her face gently, his hands running over her cheeks. She could feel the tears start up again, but ignored them, watching his face. His tired eyes and the stress acne around it all. His shoulders and neck were raw with scratch marks. I brought some cream. You said your acne flared up when you were stressed, and I brought the crustacean to help with the pain if you had an attack. Didn't know if there was room in the bag for stuff, and don't you mean there wasn't enough shroom? He asked, and she paused in her ramblings. She smacked his shoulder, and he laughed, pushing hair behind her face. I missed your smile, mon amour. She shook her head, but he didn't let go, lowering his mouth to hers. She kissed him back, his familiar taste sending butterflies in her stomach, dampening her worry. She pulled away first, burying her face in his chest. They said you're going to jail, she mumbled, her fists clinging to his shirt. It wasn't the one he had left in, but it definitely wasn't his. It was too plain for him. She stared at the fabric between her fingers as he wrapped his arms around her back. I know, he whispered, kissing her head as he rocked her. She let him, forcing her worries and doubts away for just a few moments. He was okay. He was alive and breathing, and he hadn't left her. He still had her. Is that my shirt? He asked, moving his hands to her waist. She pulled back just enough to look down at her shirt, nodding slowly. It had a band she didn't know on it, but the edges were embroidered and tailored to look fancier. It looks good on you. But where's your dresses? She shook her head, kissing his shoulder gently. He huffed but didn't say anything as they just stood there. Her hands dropped to his side before she froze and pulled back. What is it? He asked, his eyebrows furrowing. She touched the hem of his oversized shirt, pulling on it slightly. He nodded at her silent question, and she pulled up the shirt. A jagged scar ran across his stomach, the lines old and new, piled on top of each other. She could see the marks where the band had sat, digging into his sides. I know it's not pretty, he mumbled, touching her hand. It doesn't hurt right now. They have me on new medication for it, so don't worry. She nodded slowly, tracing the edges with her finger. It was hard not to wince at it, but she forced herself to stay still, examining every dip and ridge. So you don't need crustacean? She asked. He laughed, a real laugh that sent goosebumps over her skin. He pulled her in again, kissing her head. I love you, mon amour. Don't ever forget that. She smiled, brushing his hair out of his face. She took one of her clips off, attaching it to hold his hair back. Without any of his products, it hung in straight lines, covering up his face. There. Vos estis belle, she said, only tripping up a little. He laughed again, shaking her head. Beau, not belle. One is masculine and one is feminine. He explained it to her. She flushed, cursing herself in her head for not looking it up. She just repeated what he had told her in the past. It was a cute attempt. She slapped him on the shoulder again, laughing. When you come back to UA, you can teach me more, she told him. He went still, and she looked up at him, confused. I'm not going back to UA, Kinoko, he said, looking down at her seriously. They'll get you out. They have to. You were manipulated as a child and you came clean. You're a good guy. she tried to reason. He shook his head. But not a hero. I can't be after what I did. I put everyone in trouble, Kinoko. I can't go back there. She frowned, holding his hand tightly. You have to come back. I can't be alone. Just in school. If I get out, I'll get a job. I'll be with my mom again. We can still see each other. He kissed her hand gently. I promise. She buried her face in his shoulder, too tired to argue. He would get out. He would come back to her and help her with her dresses again. She would help him with his medicine and his sketches. They would find things he could enjoy more. She wouldn't let anyone take him. His hands tightened on hers, a gentle smile on his tired face. You're stuck with me now. I'll be by your side forever, mon amour. Oh my goodness. Alright, that concludes Mon Amour. Oh, I can't see anything right now. I don't know how I got through that last, half. It is 1 a.m. on the day after Christmas morning, but, like, Christmas night, you know? I'm so tired. I got my Christmas present to myself was a new computer. I finally saved up enough to buy one, so I'm actually recording from my own PC, which is, like, a really new thing for me. So hopefully that means I can actually record more. I probably won't do something like this again, where it's really long. I might actually split this one up into 2. I want to talk about the fic because I'm sorry about the break, but I want to talk about the fic. I will be getting into, what was the last one I was doing? United Alliance Institute. I will be getting back to that one. But I also want to maybe try branching out to other authors. So if you guys have, like, any suggestions for that, leave, oh my gosh, the comment in the suggestion in the comments. I'm so sorry. But as far as this fic goes, so this is actually part of a mini series I'm doing for myself called Rare Pairs Galore, where I take a spinner and I just spin it and I write for that ship, because I don't think there's any other Toru and not Toru, that's another fic I'm working on has her in it. I don't think there's any other Yuga and Komori. Oh, that's wrong. There are apparently 3 Yuga and Komori fics. Mine and 2 others, but it looks like the other 2 has them as a side ship, so probably not a really big thing. One's explicit, so I will never read that one, and the other only has 1 chapter at 1,000 words, so, and that was updated May 2024. So anyways, they're not a ship that I've ever seen before, that I've never seen anyone talk about, because usually it's always Aoyama kind of goes with whoever people put him with, but usually, right now a lot of people are putting him with Toru. I'm sorry. Usually you see Komori with Kurio. I gotta say, I've never actually pronounced his name out loud until I was reading this, and I did it all in one sitting. So this is like hour recording that I then have to figure out how to put into YouTube, because I don't have my usual editing software. But I've never said his name out loud, so when it popped up again, I was like, oh no, I don't know how to pronounce this, so I'm so sorry if it was pronounced wrong. I also want to apologize for butchering all of the French in this story. If any French speakers listen to this, I know no French. I am so sorry. That last line actually was in French. I just could not pronounce it, so I pulled up Google Translate and I just translated it and then just left Mon Amour, which that's not even the right pronunciation. I'm so sorry. I did my best with what I could, but I've tried learning other languages before and it just doesn't work out for me. My brain just can't focus long enough to learn them. But yeah, so there's a few other what was that noise? There's a few other ships I did in this series, and that was a Bandit to Join 2, which I think I did. I may have actually read that one. I don't remember. That was my Kyokajiro and Koji Koda fic. So I don't know if I read that one on YouTube, but that one was written after. How was it written after? That one should have been written before. I don't know why it's saying it was written after. Oh, no, sorry. It was written before. It was written like an entire year before. And then the one before that was a hero costume for Beast, which was my Mei Hatsume and Jiroto Shishida, which again I think I did on YouTube, but I'm not sure. If I didn't, I'll probably do those in the future. I have taken a pause from writing those, so feel free to go ahead and close out of this video now. I'm just going to talk a little bit about my fics and where I want to go as an author and a podficer, because I'm struggling a little bit with balancing everything. As far as where I want to go, I'm so sorry. Again, as I said, I've been talking for an hour and 30 minutes straight, reading that fic, and my eyes hurt and my voice really hurts, but so I don't know if I'll finish UAI. I really, really want to. I have so few chapters left to UAI, but I keep getting distracted by other fics, other storylines, other everything, that it's now like my second page, because it's been, is it not my second page? I don't know where it is. That's not. Anyways, so most recent things and things, oh, it's not. So yeah, it's been over a year since I updated it. I really want to finish it, because there's like 4 chapters left in it. I will do it eventually. As for my other fics that I'm currently working on now, I'm in a server with some people, and they have some fic ideas. So I've done one of them, Green Grim Watcher of the Dead. I do want to podfic that one. It is 29,000 words, or 29,000 words. It is a fic where, let me read it out. The church grim usually takes the form of a large black dog and guards churchyards from those who would profane them. It keeps order in the church and punishes those who perpetuate scandals. When Izuku dies and loses who he is, he knows one thing: his job: protect his souls from all. So this is based on the idea of church grims, which is a thing where they used to bury a black dog as the first thing in any graveyard. That way that black dog acted as a kind of protector for those souls in the graveyard. So in this one, when Izuku dies, his mom can't afford a proper burial, so she goes with this shady business route and gets him buried in a cemetery, and he basically comes back as a church grim who doesn't actually have any connections to his past life, because his gravestone is never engraved with his name, so he doesn't really have connections to his past memories. Oh, I'm so sorry, my throat hurts so much. A Mother's Protection, I might read. It's 24,000 words, so it's less than Church Grim. I liked it at the beginning, not really at the end. It's a fic where Izuku goes missing, so Inko basically decides to be a vigilante, but instead of like running over rooftops and everything like Izuku did, she actually uses her connections as a lawyer and from her past to find him. Mei Majima was another fic fight one I did, about Mei's dad actually being power loader and how that would go at 19,000 words. And then I have a few others. Adopted Murder got kind of popular, which is a vigilante Izuku Fumikage fic where they adopt Eri. That one's at 65,000 words and is finished. Past Users of Our Hope is one I'm still working on. It's one of my older fics that I'm very slowly working on, and it has 4 chapters so far. So we've went through the first 4 holders: Yoichi. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yoichi. What the fuck? Who's the second? Yoichi. hold on. This is actually gonna mess with me because I spent so long reading these. Kudo. Oh my gosh. Yobichi, Kudo, Bruce, and Hikage. I finished all those and I have to do the next ones. Did y'all know that the third holder's name is actually Bruce Lee? Like, that's his canon name is Bruce Lee, and that's the stupidest thing ever to me. Friend Who's Made. I'm still working on. And then I started a Toru-based fic with ideas from someone else on the server, and it's a dad Sukayuchi adopts a vigilante Toru who's just trying to protect her little sister because no one can see them, and deals with a lot of body issues and identity issues and anxieties over being invisible and lots of angst. I still don't know how I want to end it. But basically, as a writer, what I'm trying to do is after this one, because this one I was just really excited for, I want to stop writing more, and I want to go back and finish the ones I've started and have not finished. Let's see. Which is 6. I have 6 that I have not finished yet, and it is the UAI, which has 4 chapters left, Acrobatics of the Heart, which I don't plan to ever finish, Past Users of Our Hope, which I have 4 left to do, Friend Who Was Made, who I have no idea how much I want in that one, an explicit fic, which I won't talk about here, and then my Toru fic. So that's not too many, and I feel like I can do it, especially because I'm on break right now and I have a little more time. But between recording chapters, which I want to finish UAI, which I will finish reading that, I just wanted to get this one out of the way as my first video back. As far as a schedule goes, I want to shoot for every week, but I mean, you guys all know how bad my scheduling has been. I am going to try my hardest now that I have a computer and a way to actually record myself. But I really think that's it. Again, I will try to post more. I will try to record more. And I don't know if you guys can hear it. And I do apologize if you can, if there's like a fan noise in the background of this entire video. Unfortunately, the cord my microphone came with is so small that it can't stretch much further than the PC where it's plugged into. And if I try a different cord, it just doesn't work. So it has to be this exact cord for some reason, which it's the smallest cord ever. So hopefully it works all right. Alright, I'm gonna end it here before I have a coughing fit. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll be back with UAI shortly.